setup. So in NAT mode, that's good. We can set that up. Another thing to think about is your hard drive. So we can see that the hard drive is not defined yet. Okay. Well, that'll be there in just once we get this further along. I wanted to change the NAT setting first, though, because it's important not to be in bridged mode, especially with Metasploitable, and I'll talk about that later as well. But bridged mode is bad for doing security testing, for hosting vulnerable VMs, because now that virtual machine will get an address on the same network as the one that you're on. And since it's a vulnerable machine, that would be dangerous. So we're going to leave it in NAT mode. I'm going to close this, and now I'm going to finish the beginnings of building my Kali instance. All right, so I'm going to, now that I can see, here's my hard disk information. I had to close that other window. So I'm going to select this really quick so we can inspect the settings. One of the things that you might want to do, there's different schools of thought about this. There's one school of thought that says that a pen testing machine should be in a non-persistent mode, because you want to just be able to boot it up, run some tools, maybe send some data somewhere, and then you're done, which is fine. Or the other school of thought says, well, this is my pen testing machine that I want to keep all my information contained in. So in order for that to happen, we have to change this disk to be persistent. So we're going to go to our advanced settings button here. I want to make the disk independent, which means that it's not affected by snapshots. So if you were planning to snapshot your Kali instance and revert to it back, revert back to that later, this won't be an option. But in any case, if we make this disk independent, we can select persistent, which treats the virtual disk the same way that a system treats a regular physical disk. If we make it non-persistent, now every time you boot up this VM, it'll be the same as it was the first time you booted it up. In my case, or in our case perhaps, we don't want that. We want to keep it persistent. So all the changes we make, all the improvements we make, all the customizations that we make to this VM will be captured and preserved. Okay, that's the last change I want to make. 512 meg of RAM is probably fine unless we're going to be using certain tools later. One processor is also fine. You can always adjust these later if you decide that your Kali instance is not performing up to your standards. Another thing to think about regarding resources is the resources of your host itself. If you're running Player or running Workstation on a reasonably fast Windows 7 machine or Windows 10 like I'm running, and you probably want to have about 8 gig of RAM. The reason I say that is in order to have Kali running and to have Metasploitable running and maybe another VM that's used for Target for pen testing, each of those, are going to take half a gig of RAM or a gig of RAM or maybe even more. So it's better to have a nice cushion. 8 gig of RAM is a decent minimum. I'm actually running with 32 because I might be hosting as many as 4 or 5 VMs at one time, and I want to have enough capacity to manage that kind of a virtual environment. Okay, so on to the building process. We're going to power on the virtual machine. It's going to come up, well, that's a little bit annoying. You want to click on this window, and you'll notice that the live version of Kali is available as an option. That will build a version of it that's non-persistent, that you just use when you need it, and then when you shut it down, it's just like it was the first time you turned it on. We're going to go all the way down to the graphical install. This gives us the full graphic environment where we have multiple desktops and some nice tools and command shells and such. So we'll go ahead and select this option. Once I'm in the window, I just hit enter, and then the boot process will begin. I'm not going to have the video running for the whole boot process. Most of you will be familiar with some of the settings that are required. For instance, we have to pick our language. You pick your country, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here.